What's good in YouTube? This is Crazy Samurai 71 here bringing another video. Today I'm bringing a video on Power Rangers Ninja Steel. Today we finally got the first episode. As you can see here, I'm wearing a Power Rangers Ninja Steel t-shirt I got from Power Morphicon. I do have a shirt for the Blue Ranger. That one was one I got during Ninja's time when it was on TV actually. So I decided to get that t-shirt a while back now. Still love that shirt, and this one only covers so much of the actual shirt. So the one that I have, it actually doesn't just stop here, it actually goes all the way up, which is much nicer, but this is still cool. I also got the black sweatshirt from Power Morphicon, so I do have several Ninja Steel like clothing items that I have, including also I do have the Japanese Megazord, so keep that in mind. But anyway, I thought I would do a review of Return of the Prism, the first episode for Power Rangers Ninja Steel. And so, I'll tell you this much right now, I liked it. I didn't get to do a video covering my thoughts on the theme song, which I will talk a little bit about here, but my focus will obviously be on the episode itself. For starters, the episode starts with us learning about Brody and his father, who was a ninja master, who ended up finding the Ninja Nexus Prism and tried to take out the Ninja Nexus, which was the shuriken within the larger shuriken that they have been trying, that holds the power. And so what happens is that we end up finding out that Brody was training in all this, and his father ended up finding the Ninja Nexus Prism and the Ninja Nexus Star, and what ended up happening was Brody ends up being put under attack. We end up seeing his brother, who is also the son of the Ninja Master, and he looks very similar in some ways, and what happens is that all that is going on, and we basically kind of assume that he was also training to be a ninja. We have no idea any information about what happened to his brother. We saw his brother briefly, so we have no idea where he is, what happened to him, or anything. All we can tell is that he probably ended up staying inside of the house, but there'll probably be a backstory when we get to that point, which more likely than not, he will probably be the Gold Ranger, because if he's been trained to be a ninja, why wouldn't they make the brother the Gold Ranger? That's personally how I feel. But yes, he lived on Earth and all that, and what happens is that his father is having to defend Brody. What happens is that Galvanox tries to steal the Ninja Nexus, and he has it in his hand, and he's trying to gain the power. Well, actually what happens is that first of all, his father turns into the Red Ranger. Yes, he turns into the Red Ninja Steel Ranger, and he fights for a little while, but eventually gets weakened down to the point that the power dissipates from him, and then Galvanox has it. He starts to drain the power, starts getting this red energy around him, coursing through his body. What happens is that suddenly Brody's father is like, I will not let you have the power of the Ninja Nexus, and suddenly he comes out, slashes it, breaks it into 6 pieces, the Ninja Nexus Star, and it then forms in the Ninja Nexus Prism, where it creates the 6 Ninja Stars. Ninja Power Stars that the 6 Rangers get. And you actually see all 6 Ranger Power Stars. So you can see the Gold Ranger Power Star. And you may think to yourself, that's very unusual for them to actually show all 6 there. But that's pretty interesting at the same time, because what that implies is that it's visible from the very beginning, the 6 stars. Now, obviously, that also explains why Gold is being introduced so early. Why would you show all 6 if you're not going to get all 6 pretty early? So obviously, it makes sense in this case. So what that more than likely implies is that Gold will most likely gain his powers by the 8th episode, which is what everyone's been expecting. Anyway, let's keep going here. He suddenly, Brody's captured. His father, when he destroys the Ninja Nexus, actually vanishes from existence. No idea what happens to him. Probably teleports somewhere. Very unclear. So at that point, what happens is that Brody's captured, and then you see 10 years later, you end up finding out that yes, there's Ripcon, who's one of the major villains. There's Galvanox. The female monster villain is Madame Odier, which you find out a little bit later. But then what happens is that we see Brody on the ship. It then moves forward to the little teaser clip that we got to see of Brody on the ship. We end up seeing Kelson again, which is great. He ends up talking about escaping with Brody. You see Redbot, which is great. Brody ends up having a conversation with Kelson, and then eventually a conversation with Ripcon and talking about like Ninja Master and how what has that done for you. Basically, we understand now what that was implying. The fact that, you know, what did it do for him as a Ninja Master? He disappeared. He's gone now, and now what happened? His son is a prisoner on a monster ship. Yeah. So at that point, what happens is that we've seen Madame Odier, we see all that stuff happening, and they're told, like, okay, prepare for the Galaxy Warrior tournament that goes on. And what happens is that during that, we end up seeing the Warrior Dome. The Warrior Dome, we end up also seeing who is the host for the Warrior Dome, who is someone that a lot of people are really, really annoyed about. Why? Because they basically took Baron Nero from ToQger. Yes, ToQger. They used Baron Nero, who had an awesome design, who was super evil, super cool, and they decided, let's redo his face. And a lot of people have like even associated with his face with Elgar. In fact, Elgar from Turbo. Yeah, I can kind of see that. I'm not a big fan of the face change either. I really wish that they would have kept the original face design or at least done something better. Not saying this is the worst thing in the world, but definitely not what I was hoping for if they were going to reuse Baron Nero's face. I do like that they actually used some character from ToQger just to represent it in some capacity, because they didn't do any representation really when it came time for Dino Charge, when it came to representing Go Busters. So that is cool to see that they are representing it. And his name is Cosmo Royale. If anyone is curious, yes, that's his name. Cosmo Royale is the name of that character. As far as what other information we're going to know about him so far, we really don't know. All we know is just he's the host for his tournaments, because the whole entirety behind the tournaments for the Warrior Dome is that it's supposed to be battle to the fittest, and like if you can defeat your opponents, then you have the right to try and claim one of the ninja stars. So what happens is that we end up seeing one opponent who I feel like he looks like someone from he might be someone that's actually from Ninja, but I almost thought he was from Operation Overdrive. And then he goes up against a character that's well known from RPM, the character that Gemma and Gemma go up against early on in the show. So that's pretty interesting to see that they actually repurpose that character. You do see what's her name? The vampire witch from Mystic Force that was used again in Dino Charge. But it is interesting to see that they are repurposing character designs, because you see them in the audiences, some of them. But the monster from RPM actually was the opponent of this monster that I thought looked like someone from Operation Overdrive, which is really cool. It might have also been from Ninja. I just don't remember right now. I haven't watched Ninja in a little while. But yeah, so that is cool. He ends up defeating the monster, and then he tries to reach into the Ninja Nexus Prism. What happens is that he ends up putting his hand through. It says, "Oh, my hand's in," and then suddenly the thing rejects him, shoots him out. He flies across flies through the air and bangs up against the wall. At that point, that's all that stuff is happening. We end up finding out that Brody and Redbot and Kelson end up hearing some information that's going on between Madame Odier, Galvanox, and Ripcon, where they're talking about, like, you know, they've been trying for the past 10 years to gain access to the Ninja Nexus Prism and take out the Ninja Stars. Unfortunately, it has been working, as they've been trying different things, and it still hasn't been working. And Madame Odier suggests going to Earth, where they end up finding the Ninja Nexus Prism, and apparently there's Ninja Steel there, so they're trying to possibly use that Ninja Steel to create new Ninja Stars that they could use for their own benefits. So it is interesting to see that. Obviously, Japan is doing it very different from... Japan and America are very different in how they're doing this story, but it's interesting. Anyway, what happens is that following that, we end up seeing, like, they end up hearing all this stuff, and they're like, they want to escape the ship, and they manage to somehow take the Ninja Nexus Prism back to Earth. That includes Brody, Redbot, and Kelson, and Kelson's character, which I am forgetting his character right now. I keep on calling him Kelson. I know that's not the name that they're giving him in this show, but you get my point. It is interesting to note that that is going on, but yeah, no, I just wanted to say that. Anyway, what happens is that they go to Earth, but in the meantime, we end up seeing on Earth the whole entire other teaser bit that we got to see for the season regarding what do you call it? Regarding the other Rangers. So we got to see Preston coming out from his magic show, and we got to see, you know, Sarah using her hoverboard, which is based off of her pink sword. We got to see Calvin with his yellow truck, and Haley as well with her wolf, and Sarah nearly hitting Calvin in the head, and suddenly Preston and Sarah meet up with each other. But then we end up meeting our bully characters that are going to represent our Bulk and Skull kind of characters for the season, which is pretty interesting to note. I will say that right now. I actually am pretty interested to say that the characters are named Victor, Vincent, and the other one is named Monty. We have no idea what his last name is right now. But yeah, so those are the characters. So that's important to note. I'm just trying to double check something here. Monty, Victor, Mick, right? Okay, but yeah, no, that's very cool to note. So then what happens is that we end up seeing inside there that, like, you know, Sarah's trying to get registered for classes at the new high school that they're going to, and suddenly she's introduced to Victor and Monty. Victor Vincent is apparently the class president of their year, and Monty is this nerd that's kind of a suck up to Victor, and Victor's kind of tough and buff, but he's not very smart. So he's basically like Bulk, except for the fact that, you know, Bulk was heavy set, like overconfident and kind of goofy. Victor Vincent is, you know, strong, not smart, but has a goofy side to him. Monty's just kind of nerdy. And says what he feels, and isn't the same goofy side that, like, say, Skull has, because you would imagine that that's who you're connecting with, you know, who's the leader character here. Victor, Bulk, Monty, Skull, you know. You can't compare Bulk and Skull to Victor and Monty, but they're an interesting attempt. Anyway, let's get into further details here. What happens is that Victor tries to use her hoverboard. He ends up failing miserably, gets hurt, ends up actually traveling all around, traveling outside of the school, ends up going to the magic show where Preston is. And Preston, we finally get to see what is the thing that's going to represent the dragon sword that he has. And what happens is that he ends up doing a magic trick, which he says, like, I will now transform into a dragon. And he uses a magic trick and ends up putting on a dragon costume. That's the representation that we got. Now, obviously, it's not like a permanent, ever a constant thing, although what that could imply is that he'll probably be using that same trick several times over in future episodes of the show, but we have no idea of knowing anything for a fact. But the dragon was blue, and it did look kind of like how it's supposed to look, so that is interesting to note. That does mean that they finally found a way to connect that aspect, because it's like, how else would you connect a dragon? You're not going to just have like a pet dragon with you. Not going to happen. So that is interesting. All that ends up happening, and then what happens is, following that, we end up moving on to I'm trying to think now. You know, Victor doesn't apologize for what he did, and like Monty says, like, that's the first time that probably anyone will remember any of Preston's shows, and so, you know, he's made fun of, and then Sarah's like, you should say sorry, like, and all that stuff. And so then what happens is that they see like a whole bunch of garbage coming in from a distance, and that is where Brody ends up appearing. Now, to explain what happened there, they end up actually taking the Ninja Nexus Prism, and it doesn't. What happens is that they end up traveling out of the ship, landing on Earth with the Ninja Nexus Prism, read by Kelson's character and Brody. So then what happens is that they're under attack, and they're trying to take out the ninja, and they're trying to communicate with Brody's friend Mick. He ends up trying to contact him, but for some reason the communication device is not working. As far as other things go, we end up then seeing that Sarah and Preston come over to help with Brody, and they end up fighting off against this monster that's trying to steal the Ninja Nexus Prism back from Brody. They end up fighting, and then suddenly they end up taking out the Ninja Steels. So Preston becomes the Blue Ranger, Sarah becomes the Pink Ranger, and Brody becomes the Red Ranger. At that point, they end up fighting the monster and beating him up. Doesn't destroy him, but does do damage to him. They do transform. They do not do their morphing sequence, even though in the theme song you do see it. But that all happens, and Brody says, like, I'll be able to figure this out on my own. Unfortunately, but for his sake, he ends up learning that, no, Sarah and Preston are like, no, we're going to help you. You're not going to do this on your own. And he says, all right. And the episode pretty much, for the most part, ends. And that's where it goes from there. We do see Redbud. We see all these characters. Overall, it's a good start. As far as what my opinion of the season is so far, I like it. I like what they're doing with this first episode. I can totally see that most likely his brother will end up being the Gold Ranger. That is pretty likely, especially since why would they make his father someone that's going to be the Gold Ranger? Clearly he was the Red Ranger at one point, but maybe he'll be one of the alternative forms of the Red Ranger costume that we end up seeing in the season. Something like that would probably happen. We'll have to wait and see for a fact, but we'll see. One of the other ninjas that ends up showing up at some point. But anyway, it should be interesting to see how this season goes. I do like how this first episode worked out. As far as the theme goes, I don't mind the theme. I like the repetition. It's sort of like this theme is sort of like a mix of like the constant annoying repetitiveness of seasons like Samurai, Super Samurai, Megaforce and Super Megaforce, and then taking some of the more interesting wording that was used in Dino Charge and Dino Supercharge, where they actually had like actual words to it rather than just the same 2 or 3 lines that those earlier seasons had. So it is good to know that it's sort of a mix. I still kind of prefer Dino Charge's theme over this one, but this is fine. It's not as good as I was hoping it to be, because when I first heard the theme I was like, oh, this sounds cool. And it is cool, but it's definitely not as good as I feel as Dino Charge, because I was hoping maybe they would have a lot more substance that Dino Charge had, where it was really a longer theme and there was a lot more going on, and like the Go-Go Power Rangers with less emphasis. It's emphasized here, but it's actually done better, I feel, because it's not it works a little bit more, and there's a little bit more going on with that. So it's sort of like a mix. It's not as good as Dino Charge, but it's still good. Anyway, overall, I like this so far. I am curious to see how this is going to progress. I do want to see how Calvin and the Haley's characters develop out and how they do that. I like each of their characters in different ways. I like the feel of the characters so far. I do want to see how the villains work and how the Megazord comes into play, but we'll see what happens. I'm looking forward to the season big time, so please leave your comments below. Tell me what you guys think. Did you guys enjoy this episode? Have you guys seen it? And if so, what were your thoughts? Excuse me. So anyway, please remember to leave a comment below. Tell me what you guys think of this episode, and I hope you guys enjoyed. Can't wait for the next episode. So, guys, I'm Crazy Sarah 71, and goodbye, guys.